Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films Camp Chatter. Great episode today. One of my favorite people on the show and off the show, Twitter buddy of mine, family man, new dad. It's Debonair Dev Panchwagh with us. I don't know if you don't like the nickname or do like it. If you don't like it, it's kind of better for me though, Dev.
No, I like it. A dashing dev will go as well, but debonair's good. I like that. I'll have to work that into my conversations with my wife later and just kind of sprinkle that in as, to
Yeah,
prop up my value, which is always important.
yeah, you know what they call me online, honey. They call me Debonair Dev. Don't take me for granted.
Exactly. I'm sure she'd love hearing that. Just me. Um,
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm not a. I've been told I'm humble, but it's kind of a front. I'm not very humble. But
there you
anyway.
go. I mean, hey, there's plenty of things to be humble about, but there's also things that you know. One of the things, if you're not familiar with Deb, Ravens historian, excellent writer, love his writing, and even in tweets, Dev, I appreciate how you're able to concisely make a bunch of points and explain yourself because tweets can get taken out of context if you don't explain them thoroughly enough. But then again, you don't have a lot of space, so it's a talent within itself.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I do take some pride in that. I know we've had Meta has, or is it Meta? Sorry, I said the wrong name of the platform. X has expanded in terms of the things you can do editorially on the platform. I still stay within the character count, though. I do think there's an art to that. Maybe it has something to do with I'm in marketing profession as well, and social media has been part of my job description, and so yeah, you get into that mode, right? Short copy, short text. How's that impactful? But always love to be on your channel. You've been good to me in the past, so and we have a great conversation. I know we had a couple things that we were kicking around during the summer, and we were like, let's get together and talk. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. So I don't want to waste any more time. No, you're a busy guy. We're talking about the wide receivers today, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth on these guys. A lot of excitement. Fans from of every level of fan just don't follow the Ravens much on the offseason to follow their every move. They know about this group being improved, but let's get more specific with it. And want to start with the rookie Zay Flowers, turning a lot of heads this training camp. So before we get into some of the details with Zay, just wanted to simply ask you, do you think Zay Flowers plays tomorrow night? If so, how much? What do you expect from the preseason game one?
Yeah, good question. I know that's been tossed around. I do think he'll get some snaps. I mean, the other rookie receivers, if there's any, and I know the Ravens won't look at that as the decision making parameters for them, right? But if you look at Jordan Addison played last night, Tank Dell, so those guys all played. I do think he should get some snaps. I think it would make sense. You have to see the transition, right? Like, how does he acclimate in live fire to get off a press, for example? Like, is there some technique stuff that they might want to see, and they can't quite gauge it other than in a game, right? So there's some value to that. There's a way to control that, but I do think let him play. I know there's concern potentially of Rashod Bateman and not healthy from a depth perspective. Do you expose a? I don't think I don't think it's a big deal. I think they can easily get him a few snaps, and they can get a look at what they need to without feeling as though it's a useless exercise for a player they want to keep healthy, because he is a rookie. We have no clue what he's going to do. Again, everything's been phenomenal on paper. He's doing great, but get him out there against some other team, right? That's my take on that. I think he should play, and he will play.
Got it. I tend to agree with you on most of that. I don't want to see him giving this part I especially agree with. I don't want to see him getting a bunch of gadget touches. Maybe one bubble screen or some kind of short pass where he can show off his burst and get used to the NFL speed of the game. But I don't think he needs too much of that because I think Zay Flowers is the NFL speed of the game. People are
Mm-hmm.
going to have to adjust to him. But where I'd like to see him get experience is what you alluded to, Dev. Put him out at X on an island. See if he can get off press by himself. Move him around. Let him run different routes. Let him get used to this because he's learning a lot here under Keith Williams. He was a very urgent extremely urgent player. This has been mentioned in a few different conferences where he's not really setting up his route. He gets open with just pure speed and
Right.
quickness. So it would be nice for him against some NFL competition to get used to mixing his speed, slowing it down and then speeding it up, using some deception in his routes. So I'd like to see him run a good number of routes, but for me, I don't really need to see him with the ball in his hands to see how much yak he can get. I think that he's good to go with that. Maybe one of those touches, but let him run a bunch of routes.
That's a good point, and it's an interesting one. And I agree. That's something that I've touched on, or it has come up organically. When you look at Zay and you assess him, he came out of college. His talent was enough for him to get open pretty often in college. So it is more, and it's an exciting proposition for Keith Williams and those guys as far as, well, he's been so good, and I think he even self-described he could only run certain routes in college. So they kind of capped him with certain technique that he could use. Whereas here, it's everything's full go. But one other thing I'd want to add to what you said as far as routes, and you know this because you played. You got to also get on the field and coordinate with those other players, right? So route combinations with the other receivers, timing with the quarterback, the speed of the game, and I'm sure he'll be fine in all of those areas. But again, it goes back to, can he apply that now? So I'd like to see how he does, and you can't simulate that any other way. So if he runs an inside, let's say an inside route of some kind, like an in route of some kind, is he able to have enough spacing between the tight end and the deeper target, something like that, right? Where there's a little nuance, not only with the release, the route technique, but also how he's running it in combination with everyone else.
Right, and the Ravens are going to see a lot of zone dev with Lamar as the quarterback, so maybe he's got to take a little off his speed coming out of that break, or get out of the break quickly, but then kind of settle down in a spot in between the safeties and the linebackers, just to be a quarterback friendly target. And the other part of this is there's going to be butterflies for him come opening day. Definitely a different situation, but to get some of those butterflies out, in this first game. Not saying he's going to be nervous or that kind of thing, but let's face it, you put on the NFL jersey and you go out there, whether it's a preseason game or not, he's going to be amped up, and it will give him a chance to be more relaxed, I think, come regular season. If it's not his first NFL action, here it is, week one.
Exactly. And what if he gets hit, and it gets tackled, or has to deal with some physical contact, even just getting a play or two under his belt, getting his confidence down, can help. And we know he's primed for the moment, but you just can't underestimate the difference it is when you play in the game versus practice versus training camp. So I do think, regardless of everything that looks phenomenal on paper, I have no doubts about him and his attitude, and I have no doubts he's going to be a guy that I think overcomes the Ravens' curse at receiver. I just want to see it, and I want him to get as much game time and I'm sure he would want that too, right? He's probably chomping at the bit. He's a competitor, so I think it can only help him. Let him get some playing time. Let's get a look at him and get him, again, get him some confidence, get him some plays, get him some momentum. I think that can all help him. Because it could go the other way too. Let's say you're a receiver and you drop like 2 or 3 passes to start your career. That could get in your head, So I think it could be an opportunity for him positively if he takes it that way. Whether he makes a play, like you said, at the bare minimum, he runs some routes. They see how he does technically and the ability to handle that. The upside is maybe he makes a play or two, and that would be great too.
That's right. Hey, Dev, one specific aspect of Zay's game that I loved coming out of college was his physicality, talking about finishing runs, just not shying away from contact, competing. He's a competitor, a very competitive guy. So I wanted to talk to you about that skill in particular, that mindset translating to the NFL level. Now, I'm not saying that Zay is going to all of a sudden turn into a wallflower and start flopping or going out of bounds, but I think that there is some kind of balance to be had with not risking yourself to for a yard to get sandwiched in between three guys and just take unnecessary, getting slinged to the ground or say. But I don't want to take that away from his game. I want to see the aggressive yak, that mindset that, one on one, he's if he can't go around you, he's going to try to go through you and get down. How do you see that translating to the NFL? Because I have to be honest, the two things that disappear the most for me for receivers at the NFL level is speed, because all the cornerbacks, everybody's fast, and the physicality. There are physical college receivers that lose some of that when they come to the NFL.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting to take all those points on, and I feel like he might just be in a position where it would be hard to rein him in. Possibly, this is how he operates. This is his mentality. The yak you mentioned, it's a byproduct, I think, of him fighting for those extra yards, not wanting to go down. He wants to punish people when he's out there. But you bring up an interesting point. Are you going to sacrifice yourself the same way in the NFL where everybody's on a level playing field, athletes, and he's going to take his licks. And you don't want to just think about that one play. You want to think about 4 or 5 games out. It is also a longer season for these college players when they come in. I think they take it for granted that it is 17 versus 13 games or something. So that's a significant difference. And so those are some factors. One thing that I think he might have going for him, though, is that he's not going to play every snap potentially. Right? He's going to come out the box, and they're going to have packages for him. They're going to work him in a rotation. So when he goes out there, I'm not as worried about him holding back on his physicality potential, from my standpoint at least, because I think he'll have to make it count when he's out there. That isn't to say he should be foolish either, right? Like if he sees a DT in his face, and it's better to just kind of take it. Like I know Hollywood Brown got a lot of flack for those dives and things like that, but yeah, I think there's some certain moments where he can kind of dial it down, get out of bounds, etc., whatever, right? Because we know that when push comes to shove, he will fight for those yards. But I also would like to see him because again, he won't be taking on the punishment every single snap. So maybe there's an opportunity for him to still be himself and provide that edge, and that could be the balance that they strike. And
I mean, Dev, to
yeah,
interrupt you here for a second, Lamar is a perfect example. He will fight when it's time for goal line, third downs, when he can get extra yards, he will. But he's not going to take some kind of unnecessary body slam, to try to get an extra couple of yards when the defense has them where they want them. So that would
yeah,
be the example I'd point to.
yeah. That's a good game, and that's a very good example. And hopefully the coaches are working with Zay on that, because you would think they got the profile of him and they know his background. They've done scouting, so maybe that's something they have to work with him on. That gets back to why he should play in the preseason, see how he operates, his mentality. I think of a guy like Debo as well. I mean, he fights for the yards primarily because of the role he has in that offense. And when you put him at halfback, that's what he has to do. So I think they can they can maybe save him from himself a little bit, put him in positions where he's not going to be tempted to do that. If you do those bubble screens to the sideline and the perimeter, just coach him up to say, look, depending on what you see out there, don't be a hero. Get out of bounds. We need you for the entire season.
That's right. Last thing on Zay, Dev, I've mentioned a couple of times on my channel, so I'm just going to set you up with my opinion and let you go and not really respond. But I believe that Zay Flowers is an outside receiver. I don't want to see him pigeonholed into the slot. I think that his ideal role is a number one receiver working on the Z side. Maybe he needs a yard to get off the line of scrimmage or whatever, but a deep threat, a mid range threat, a short threat too. I don't want to see him just pigeonholed into a crowded middle of the field. Even starting this year, what's your thoughts on his development as a wide receiver and from that angle?
Yeah, awesome question. Something that I've also said too, in other ways. It's come up that, well, this entire draft class has been billed as one big slot receiver draft class. I think there's misperceptions of that across the board. And he always, when you looked at his full, I guess, resume, and he's talked about this himself, he's lined up, he's lined up on the perimeter mostly. I think it's like 25 to 30%, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of his slot snaps. It could even be higher than what I'm saying. This is off the top of my head, so I apologize if anybody's listening to that and they're like, "You're way off on your data." The point is that most of his snaps have come outside as a boundary receiver. That's how he's lived. I understand the size is the thing that jumps out immediately. And so they're going to work with him on some of that. But I think because of the way that he plays, he plays bigger than his size. He understands how to kind of work the sideline. He's really good and adept at that. So I would probably, to your point, I think I'm on the same page with you. I would rather they try to keep him outside and then work him in, sprinkle him in inside. He will. I think one thing that he'll benefit from, though, in Monken's office specifically, just looking at what Monken has done with releases from receivers, and there's quite a bit of motion. There's quite a bit of moving from left to right, getting a free release. So I could see where in those situations he could have like a two-way option maybe, or he has a post route inside off of that release. That's a free release off of motion. So I'm cool with that. And that'll create some exciting matchup opportunities as well. But yeah, I would like to see him kind of in that high inside-outside opportunity, not in the slot per se. We'll get into the other receivers, but I think there's opportunities for those guys. They're more natural slot receivers, if anything. So that's where I'm at, and those coaches know what they're doing. Monken especially, I have already full confidence in him.
Pretty exciting. An option route with Zay Flowers and have Mark or somebody be on the line of scrimmage and run something shorter. That's a great thought. Haven't really pondered that too much. So, but we're going to move on. We could do a whole episode on Zay.
Well,
but
last thing I'll
go
throw
ahead.
out this, and I was on a pod with our friend Ken McCusick, but this was something he harped on, which was deep ability that Zay could lift the top off of. And I've only been fixated on his ability underneath as a horizontal threat and to kill defenses in space. But this is what you get with Zay. You get a complete receiver. He could be 5'9", 185 pounds. I don't care. This guy can do it all. And that's where, like, the high end, I know it's lofty, but the high end comparison has been AB. Because if you think of AB, you never saw his size. You just saw a guy that could do it all, right? And I think Zay is that. I'll just leave on that because the ability to take the top off and the ability horizontally to kill teams means anything's wide open. Any route's open as well.
Yeah, I tried hard to stay away from the AB comparisons during draft season, but it's just Dev. The first time I watched them, it's just kind of impossible not to see that he's more explosive than AB. AB, you have to give him his flowers as a complete receiver. Zay's got to work up to that level, but still, it's hard not to see the comparison. So, Odell Beckham Jr. A lot of headlines. Taking a lot of pressure off Lamar, I believe. Just a personal aside before we dig into his game. But Dev, we are Twitter friends. You probably saw me last year at the end of last year saying stuff like, "If his knee is healthy, bring Odell in." This is before Lamar got hurt.
Yep.
Lamar could use a guy like Odell just to take the attention off of the other guys. We need someone that has some panache, has some respect to give Andrew some more room. Love Odell's game from that. I don't even think he needs to be 100% of the explosive old Odell. I think that, chances are he's not. He's 30 years old. He's going to be a different athlete than he was at 21, 22 years old. But his ability to manipulate defensive backs, his ability to find space, I think all of this is going to be invaluable when it comes to facing a lot of zone defenses with Lamar Jackson. He's a veteran receiver who knows what he's doing. I just wanted you to speak on Odell from the neck up here.
Mm-hmm. He is extremely his football IQ is up there. It's interesting hearing his former teammates and his former team. Sean McVay's been his comments have been public in the last couple of weeks about Odell. Andrew Whitworth, who retired, but was with that Rams team and they won a championship with Odell. That's exactly what they talked about: is his intelligence, his understanding of the game, his competitive spirit. We talked about Zay being a competitor, which is why it's really cool. It's almost like you got like the young version of Odell from a competitive perspective, right? But Odell, I mean, the guy played without an ACL, and he played most of that year and in the Super Bowl, and didn't put him basically put himself on the line physically. So yeah, I mean, the intelligence for sure. I think I'm gaining more respect is where I was going with that. What I've heard, what I've been reading from guys like McVay and Whitworth. So you can't help not to think of that part. But then you just think about. I think one of the things that I've noticed is how he transitioned a little bit. His game has evolved, going from what he was with the Giants to some extent with the Browns. Right, he was that he was pretty much that go-to guy on the outside, and he was that. But then with the Rams, they asked him to do more stuff. We got to talk about the slot. He played some slot. He rotated. He was a possession receiver. He was a third down receiver. He was a red zone guy. And you don't do those things. You don't line up in different places, and you don't have productivity everywhere unless you're smart and you understand exactly how to run a route and be on the same page with a new quarterback too. And Stafford, by the way, he came in mid-season, or not even. They had to get on the same page pretty quickly. So I would agree. When you look at everything he brings to the table, and just his IQ, his intelligence, that, like you said, respectable aspect that he brings to the game, like people have to take him seriously, and those are all things that will benefit Lamar Jackson, because no matter what, I mean, Lamar's had some veterans, I guess, in the building, but I think that you could argue that this is definitely by far the best combination of a guy that will hold him accountable as well. Like, they want to actually be able to forge that chemistry. Um,
Right.
so, so all that, I talked a lot about just one element that he brings to the table. Forget like the actual physical ability. But you are right, by the way. I got to give it to you. You were calling us out from the get go. I wasn't as much of an Odell guy before. I had to like read up on him more, learn about him more, and understand his mentality more. And the more that I started doing that, the more I thought this is exactly the type of guy they need. Especially, I think the Ravens kind of benefited in some ways because he has to prove himself. Um,
Right.
Maybe they just wouldn't have got the opportunity to even sign him in the first place, because let's be honest, people didn't want to come here. So there's a mutual benefit for both sides. I think that actually helps them as well.
Another intangible, and one of the reasons I was on the Odell train early. Too bad he wasn't healthy, but it didn't really matter last year. Let's be honest. Without Lamar, we were capped. But the Ravens are famous, Dev, as you know, as someone who follows this team very closely, for bringing in leaders. But there's different types of leaders, and we've been around sports our whole life. We've played on teams. Odell is a different type of leader than Lamar, and we're not close enough to the building to really say this with our chest and be in the know completely. But Odell's the type of guy that I feel like he will lead a group, will get on people. He demands a certain type of. I don't think. I think he's a different type of leader from Lamar, who tends to trust himself, stay in his own lane. Pumps up his guys all the time. I see Odell as a fiery leader. If things aren't going right, he is going to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen some meltdowns, some things like that. Lamar, as the leader of the team, is more cool, more even. You don't see emotion from him too often unless things are going really, really bad. Where I think Odell can hold teammates accountable. Different kind of leader on offense, and I think you need that from a skill player. It's a little bit different coming from an offensive lineman, but I love what Odell will do for what I think he'll do for this team during the week of practice to get everybody focused on what they have to do that week.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, he's an alpha presence, no doubt about it. He comes in, he sets the tone. You could tell his vibe and his energy. Just, I haven't been at camp. I haven't been at camp for years now, but just the clips I've seen, right? Just they jump off whatever screen you're looking at, and he's got a charisma to him. It's just infectious. And again, those are the things that I kind of wasn't buying into before. But to your point, now also keeping in mind, these young players have seen him win a Super Bowl recently. So leadership is great when you. I mean, we don't know, like you said, exactly like how these guys are leading per se. We're not in the building, but I will say, like, and every player will probably tell you because they've said this before in different interviews. Like, if I will buy into something that this person will say more because he's actually done it on the field, and to me, that's a credibility that he also brings to the table. So and yeah, he's going to be, and that energy isn't always just demanding. I think something was said, or McVay also focused on, is that Odell is a fun guy. He likes to joke around. He keeps things light. He's positive. So that's important too. This offense has been miserable for the last few couple seasons. You could see the body language on the players, including Lamar, where they would be frustrated. They'd be stifled. Now, I think the scheme being different is going to help for sure. But I do think having a guy out there like an Odell is going to raise them up because there's going to be times where they might get frustrated again, and you want somebody that is not only going to help pick them up, hold them accountable, but also is going to keep it light and going to say, hey, we got this, no problem, right? So I think Odell's that guy too.
Yes, I'm just really excited to see him in a Ravens uniform. So we've talked about his intangibles. We talked about his IQ. Let's talk about his workload. So my philosophy here on this, Dev, wanted to bounce this off of you, is that okay? He's not going to play 100% of the snaps. I'm not sure any Ravens receiver is going to be a workhorse receiver out there for 85, 90% of the snaps. But where I do think Odell is going to come in handy and where he's going to make his impact is the red zone and third down, say, making big plays when it counts, using his catch radius, and broken plays where Lamar has to find someone and it's not an obvious schemed thing where he's got a receiver wide open or a receiver open where he's got to make something happen because Odell can bail you out. Odell's very trustworthy. So red zone, third downs, broken plays. That's kind of where I'm looking for Odell to make his mark here.
I'm right there with you. You can't, and we won't. I think we'd be doing it a little bit of disservice to measure Odell's impact by the raw numbers. If he puts them up, that's great. If he has, I don't know, 1,200, 1,300 yards, whatever it is, right? All the fantasy football stuff. But I think for me, it's exactly what you said. When Lamar is in a pinch and he is over targeted Mark Andrews, right? Over relied on Mark Andrews. Defenses have keyed in on that, and it's led to some picks and things like that. So now, can Odell be that player for him? I liken it kind of to what Joe Flacco had with Bolden. Although physically, those guys are kind of different. Odell's a lot more physical than people think, and like you said, he's got that catch radius. He's been willing to mix it up with Stafford. The Ravens themselves got burned with a couple of third downs, in which Odell fought. It was a contested catch situation in the middle of the field. So he's able to do that as part of what I said before about him evolving his game. So he's willing to do some of the dirty work, but like you said, he's exceptional in the red zone. And I think if he can make some key catches, drive almost if it's not third down even, but like just kind of extending drives in some capacity. I look for that, and I think he's going to be receptive to being kind of on a pitch count. I don't think he'll be mad about that. I mean, let's be honest, like it's an easy thing to sell him on. Like you've been hurt, let's make sure you're healthy when it counts. So I can totally see him being almost in that role where he's another safety blanket for security blanket for Lamar. Beyond that, I do think he'll have some games where he goes off. Everything says and everything shows right now that he's healthy, and that knee is fine based on camp and what we're getting. So I expect them to also have some big games as well.
There you go. So, Dev, we got a couple of more receivers we're going to cover here. Another player we're not going to see tomorrow night, just got back to practice, is Rashod Bateman. Hard to figure out this receiver group and as far as like where the targets are going to go, what their roles are going to be. And I think for the Ravens, that's a good thing, by the way. We're not really pigeonholed into this guy's a slot, this guy's going to be an X, this guy's going to be out there, this guy's going to be a part time player. Bateman's role, though, is a little bit extra curious because of the injury. You know, my expectations, said this on the show before, so I just want to bounce it off of you. Is I think it'll be much like Hollywood's 2019 season, where he's hurt. Maybe he has to miss a game here or there when it's just acting up during the week. Maybe he doesn't practice much on Wednesdays, but he'll play through it. He'll gut it out, and he'll have a role on this team. Agree, disagree? Expand on that for me, Dev.
That's an interesting comp, and I could see why you went there with that because it's the same injury, of course. The one thing I believe he's got going for him, and it's a big one, is that apparently he doesn't have screws in his foot. So he did get the screws taken out. Uh, and as somebody that has screws from hip surgeries, and I still have them, it makes a big difference when you don't have them. So the question is he dealing right now with like inflammation and things like that? He apparently felt good coming off the pup list. They said that, or the vibe is that he's feeling good physically. So there's an upside. I do think that it won't be there until I would say after September or like the first quarter of the season, maybe like where you might see him like a little bit limited in his explosiveness and things of that nature. But I could see it kind of gaining more and more momentum just because he's not limited as Hollywood was with that. And but the beauty of his game is that he can wear multiple hats for you, kind of like Odell, like we're talking about. Right? He can be a possession receiver, or he can give you just that ability to win in zone, to sit down on routes, to be available that way. So if that's the way that he needs to be eased in, that makes I think that works. Like you said, they could figure it out because they have interchangeable pieces that they can use around him. But I do think the upside is there if I'm understanding that recovery well, for him to be fully back to what he was at the beginning of the season last year, where we saw him against the Jets be that dude. Just take the play against Miami. That's the upside I could see. But to your point, if not, then you got a guy that can move the chains. You got a guy that's a professional route runner, exceptional with his route craft. He brings a lot to the table.
Yes, one healthy, complete receiver, the most complete receiver on this team just because of his age. Odell was as fast as Rashod Bateman was at one time, probably Odell was faster. But you see it, Rashad had one of the fastest open field times last year when he broke that off in Miami. You see the downfield stuff, you see the possession stuff, all those third down conversions. I don't
After the
remember how.
catch, he's
Yeah,
really
after the catch, he's
deceptive.
really good.
Yeah,
He's just a total receiver. So I love that perspective. I hope that you're right to where maybe he starts off slowly, but without the screws, he's going to get better, healthy and healthier as the season goes along. Man, that would be great because I'm figuring he's just going to have to play through pain this year and deal with it. But if he gets healthier and healthier as the season, Dev, that would be just wonderful for the Ravens because yeah, he can wear a lot of different hats, not just in the positions that he can play at wide receiver, where he can put him, but also just what he can do. So it's going to be hard to predict,
yeah,
very hard to predict with Bateman, Zay, and Odell. You have a diverse skill set for all three of them. You could put all three of them any place, and you could ask them to do just about anything, and that's could be a strength for Monken to play with, play to, I guess. The thing is, other teams have, your number one, number two. Look at the receivers in the division with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Okay, 1-2 punch. People are going to take Chase and Higgins, and I don't blame them. But when you go for a 1-2-3 punch in the diversity that I was just speaking of, the Ravens really have something special there if all three are healthy.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many options available because of all the different skills and the different aspects of their game that they bring to the table. There's some things that they each can't quite do. Like, for example, I was just thinking about when you were describing it, change of direction. Probably Zay has it in spades over Rashod and OBJ at this point in his career. OBJ, although I think he's still he's very good, but again, that change of direction is elite and special for Zay. So there's like a little nuances, whereas Rashod's better with his release game. So maybe that's something where he's the guy that is going to set things up for everyone else off the release. So there could be. It's just interesting to think. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the film and coaches breakdowns and things like that when they're meeting to know how they're going to use these different players, and they may not even fully know themselves yet, which is totally fine. But I think the fact that they have everything available to them, that's a credit to Eric DaCosta and the front office for really, I think, putting this team together or this group together in a very thoughtful way. One thing I'll add about Rashod, you said it, health is kind of a very hard thing to pin down, right? Like, we can't project that all the way. But assuming again he doesn't deal too much with like the rigors of, I don't know, like his foot and the inflammation and things like that. I kind of wanted to just couch what I said, and in that's where I was coming from. But he could still be dealing with that. I have no clue. But there's not as much of a limitation, I don't think, with the screws being out versus being in. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Hey, I'll trust you on that, man. Your hips. Denard said last night, hips don't lie. And Dev's
Well,
hips with the screws in it don't lie.
With my screws, but I don't run 9 routes, and I don't run in breaking square routes and all these double moves and things like that. So people know I'm not a football player, but hey, I do know screws and I know metal, and I do know that stuff pretty well.
So, Dev, I'm just going to throw one out here. Part of the reason I wasn't overly interested in DeAndre Hopkins is that I wanted to see Zay turned loose, and we start looking at the options here. I mean, okay, so maybe Bateman's out this week or Odell's out this week. Well, you still have Nelson Agholor. You still have Isaiah Likely. We're not even talking about Mark this episode. I mean, how many times do you have to go to your third, fourth option during the game? So, if you're running, you have 4 guys running routes. You look and number 1's covered, then number 2's covered. You got Nelson Agholor or Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews as your third option. I mean, geez whiz, Dev, this is a lot of depth in this group, and I wanted to see Zay turn loose. I didn't want to pay DeAndre Hopkins and feel forced to feed him the ball. But aside from that, that's just my little cheap shot. Nelson Agholor, love the addition here because I do think that he brings something different, and I think he's an upgrade over Devin Duvernay as far as being able to stretch the slot here because of his ability to track the ball and his ability to bail out the quarterback. We saw Lamar have to put the ball in a few places that was away from Devin Duvernay just because the trust factor wasn't there. And I don't think Devin is the best strength of his is tracking the ball. Whereas Nelson Agholor, he does that about as well as anybody, as well as you can ask for.
That's a great point about ball tracking, and you're right. Nelson Agholor brings that to the table. He also has natural slot route receiver background too, right? So he started his career there. He's done a lot of slot work. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how much he got with New England when he went there, but I know he got used in the slot in a few times, and he was still used that way. So it's never escaped his game and his I guess his full arsenal of that he brings to the table. He's a veteran as well. He is a pretty good route runner. I think just in terms of his ability to get separation, his ability to run different routes. He has, you mentioned Zay. It's interesting, of the two, in terms of their almost like athletic makeup, there's a level of, I think, Nelson matching up with Zay where like he can get that separation naturally. He's explosive naturally down the field. So, and
Yeah,
I
that
think
pure burst, that pure speed. It's just Nelson will have that. He's got it even now in his career. It's something that won't go away, like we saw with Deshaun Jackson last year. He's
yeah,
just fast, fast.
he's got it. I know there was some stuff that was brought up that his numbers were down in New England, but I don't know that that's a him thing or was that a the quarterback couldn't get the ball to him thing, and there's some bad balls that he had to track. To your point, the ball tracking part, but yeah, I think that those are the exciting parts. He's durable too, and the Ravens, I know caught some heat for the signing when they first made it because it's just optics, right? Like they signed him, and then you have your quarterback potentially not happy. So it just didn't look good at the beginning. But um, my thing was, I thought they may have strategically targeted him because of his durability, because you have potentially with Bateman, Duvernay, OBG was not in the picture, of course, but let's say for the sake of argument that they wanted to pursue him, you're taking on a lot of injury risk at that point. So Agholor, if nothing else, he will line up, he will play as your fourth receiver. He is going to be great, and I fully expect him to have to play quite a bit at certain stretches, just given everything we talked about with the other receivers and the injuries that they're kind of overcoming, and just the rigors of it, right, Jason? Like,
Yeah,
how many times? I mean, Duvernay and Bateman went down last year. So in
right.
this receiving group, somebody's going to get hurt. You just have to prepare for it. So to your point, though, I could see Agholor um, building trust with Lamar pretty quickly. I think that they already have been doing that in the offseason. So really, really like him. I'm probably more bullish on him than other folks are,
Me too.
frankly
Me
speaking.
too. Me too. And Dev, you know, yeah, it's a league of attrition. It's a brutal league. And, just to go back to my point, okay, Chase and Higgins, you want to say they got the best receiver group. That's fine. But you look at the Ravens, you got Odell, you got Zay, that's two. You got Bateman, you got Aguilar, you got Andrews, you got Likely, that's six. And then somewhere down the line, you got Kolar, Duvernay. That's a lot of firepower for this Ravens squad, and that's what has me most excited in this absolutely brutal National Football League. Is that you're only designing a route for maybe one person, two people, and I just rattled off a bunch of names there who can win their matchup. You got a weakness somewhere, maybe a corner's a little small, maybe a corner's a little slow, big and slow. We can mix and match and really find. It gives Monken a lot of options. So Dev, want to get the final thoughts time here because we're running as we usually do, just loving the conversation. So, what haven't I asked you? What do you want to close on? What are you thinking about? What do you want to circle back to, Dev, as we head into preseason week 1 tomorrow?
Yeah, a couple of things. I appreciate the floor. Um, yeah, like you said, we could talk all day. Likely's a guy that is just so uber talented, right? And he might not be in an offense that's conducive to showcase it all every week and put up the numbers. He has a lot of talent that he has to, um, that's in front of him on the depth chart. So you brought him up multiple times, and it's worth bringing up because he is a receiver. I mean, he played receiver and he converted over to tight end. So he is that guy, and he's going to confound any defense. So I fully expect as much hype as there's been, and this is something I wanted to bring up, and I've seen it nationally as well from other folks that are not like Ravens that cover the Ravens, but a lot of hype about being in like four receiver sets and empty. And I can see that being a part of the portfolio because I think everything's up kind of on the table. I don't necessarily see it as being like their go-to offense necessarily because of what you just said. When you have Likely and you have Andrews, those tight ends are so good. You got to create mismatches. I could see one receiver formation still playing a role here somewhere, right? Where you might have Likely, Andrews, they're in heavy, and then you have Zay off to take the top off or something to that effect. So just want to keep that out there, put that out there. Likely, Andrews, like you said, Kolar, all those guys, they could line up and create all kinds of matchup problems for safeties and linebackers. So you don't want to lose that just because um, maybe you want to get maybe because you're attracted immediately to this offense with all the receivers. But and then my last point would be just to Devin Duvernay, there could still be a chance for him as well, right? We've seen again once you whittle down the depth chart, he could still be in play, and it's nice to know that you have someone like that you could plug in if disaster strikes. And I'm totally with you, by the way, with the DeAndre Hopkins thing. That's why I thought they were fine. I want to see Zay Flowers on the field. I want to see Bateman get a chance in a contract year coming up to see what he does if he can put it all together. I don't. I think that would have been overkill to bring him in, and I think where they're at, they have so many options, and they're going to be able to keep everyone happy too.
Right. Give me a corner or an edge player or something like that. Like I think we're pretty good at receiver. So
Especially
Dev,
if they can get if you can get Clowney, right? Like if you can sign Clowney, and then you have these receivers. I would much rather have that than DeAndre Hopkins, and like you said, no wiggle room to do anything. So,
yeah, I
um,
got labeled Purple Patrol in the No Fun League and all that because I didn't want DeAndre Hopkins, but I think we got plenty, man. It speaks more to the confidence I have in the guys that we have. There's one ball to go around. I think we explained that well. Even if somebody's hurt, limited. I mean, our third and fourth options on some of these routes are going to be ridiculous. So, Dev, I just want to cap one more thing. I don't think we're going to see four receiver sets hardly at all, because even if we want to go run and shoot and spread it out, one of those four receivers technically are going to be a tight end. Like,
yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
Mark
could put
Andrews. Last I checked, he didn't go anywhere.
right. He
You're never
exists.
taking him off the field unless it's like, just a complete curveball formation or they're in goal line, things like that. But you're not taking him off the field. He's your best
Hey,
offensive player outside of Lamar. And it's up for debate with like Stanley when he's at his best, right? But that's just that's nuts.
I mean, Dev, I'd like to see him rest a little bit more. That's fine. But even if you do, then you got Isaiah Likely lined up as a wide receiver. So
Sure.
just
Yeah.
to think, like if we want to spread the field with four receivers, chances are one of those guys is going to be a tight end. Is what I'm getting at. So in the stat books, it's not going to look like a four wide receiver set, even though it really is.
I'm with you. I mean, they might give him a couple blows, and they have the luxury of doing the four receiver thing. I can definitely see it coming up in certain circumstances. I don't want to totally dismiss it, but I think we're both on the same page where I think there's been a love affair, and it's good to see in Baltimore, right, with the fan base. They actually are excited about the receivers for once. So, um, but let's not forget where your bread is buttered. Andrews is phenomenal. We're lucky to have him here, and likely, like you said, could easily be a dominant tight end to come in his own right as a pass catcher.
All right, Dev, I got to get you out of here. I know the time we're up against, but like I said, I could have you on every day and talk Ravens. So this is just great. Dev, still doing some writing for Russell Street Report. I would strongly recommend, if you're on social media, to follow Dev on Twitter. And Dev, we'll try our best to get you back on again at some point this season. You know, I'm willing to work with you. If it's 4:30 in the morning, maybe not, but any other time, I'd say that would be great.
I think we're outside of that as an option for me as well with my son growing up. So yeah, we'll make it happen. I appreciate you always being flexible, understanding, and it's always great to talk to you. So thank you for the time, man.
Man, thank you so much. So, with that, I want to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. With that, Dev, say goodnight to the people.
Good night, everyone. Don't have a cow with the preseason games. Have fun with it. It's just preseason.
There you go.